The content of this episode may not be suitable for some audiences. Listener's discretion is advised. Welcome to the place of rest, where our aim is to give you language that helps you displace the growing confusion, chaos, and dis-ease of our times. My name is Jonathan Boyce, and it's my pleasure to bring to you today's episode. Virginia and I discuss how addressing insults to the human condition is vital for our healing. We hope you enjoy today's conversation.
Jonathan, thank you for joining me today. We've had quite a lineup this last month. These last two that we recorded were fascinating on many levels because, well, you lined them up. Tell us what your thinking was.
When listening to what each individual had to say, they really brought to the forefront some things and what I would consider fractures, right? Fractures that we had previously not been aware of.
Fractures that afflict us as people, right?
Exactly. One of the core principles that we look at in R.E.S.T is what happens to someone's heart when they experience a trauma, right? So the phrasing we use is broken heart and shattered soul. This is all based on, I believe it's Dr. Schwartz's work out of, is it?
Harvard.
I
think it was Harvard, yeah.
Yeah. And so this is...
Yeah, he did work with family systems and parts.
Yes. Yep. So why this has been incredibly important for us in understanding some of the confusion, chaos, and disease that is upon us at this time as a nation and also as individuals is identifying where these fractures are that are preventing every part of our constitution, spirit, soul, and body from being able to communicate with each other.
Because you just described the anatomy of disease. When there's a breakdown in communication, and we were talking about that this morning, is cancer. Cancer is just a breakdown in communication among your cells. So you're talking about, in a general sense, about among our very constituents, literally, where we hear that quiet, still voice that we avoid of the spirit, right? And the soul's conflicted. Then the body becomes sick. Mm-hmm. Yeah, I like how you just laid that out because it's not any more complicated than what you just said.
Mm-hmm. So these people who we were recording with, they have brought these ideas to our attention. Some of them we've discussed with the CEO of EMF Solutions, Corey Hillis. When Corey opened our eyes to some of the things that assault us on a quantum physical level, this opened our eyes to what our guest, Vicki Joy Anderson, and the research she has done around technology and how technology plays into the part of being the infrastructure by which information can be transmitted to bring about varying degrees of confusion, chaos, and dis-ease in someone's life. Things that they, on some level, may be aware of, right? They know that there is some degree of disease, but they're not sure why. What is the method by which this confusion, chaos, and disease is affecting their lives? So it's shining light on what some of those things are.
Her work was fascinating and frankly jolting. While we were speaking, I felt the weight and the implications of what she was saying so severely that I had a physical reaction to the conversation that we had because the implications are severe. For example, she talks about the frequencies, the resonance, the technology that is like a tsunami that is upon us and the implications it has on our spirit, our soul, and our body. And she broke it down in a way that was jolting because I think we all observe the consequence of what she's saying, but the authority that she spoke with, the credibility that she had is all woven into the tapestry of her own story. She became an authority on the subject because of her own suffering. It's the beauty and the ashes of what she's had to navigate. Surgeries, I think from the time she was 10 days old, right? She was disfigured, massive facial disfigurations. She's had a lifetime of surgeries. And when you consider the experiences that she's had spiritual experiences, psychological experiences, and of course, the physical trauma is almost indescribable. But when she put that whole conversation together in the context of energy, it made me think of Hudson. Honestly, because I know the history of your in-laws, mother-in-law, father-in-laws, all the entire family system. And of course, I know your medical history very well and your spiritual pilgrimage and your emotional pilgrimage in great, great, great detail. You held nothing back. But then when we started dealing with the disease of your son and the confusion, chaos, and disease, and of course, you went to the best of the best that you could find. But really, at the end of the day, it came down to understanding the convergence of disciplines. And I think Mrs. Anderson just addressed it with such great clarity in the realm of energy and frequency, and again in resonance, really the consequence of what these little devices and electromagnetic fields are having on us. Mm-hmm. That I've never, ever heard. And I never connected those dots. So I thought it was fascinating. But Hudson did come to mind. You did come to mind. And I thought, wow. And of course, the work of Corey, trying to protect us from the implications of these things. And I'm just fascinated by this body of knowledge and information that is emerging. And I know you and I are searching for words to even bring it all together, but at least it's a step in that direction. So thank you for tolerating this conversation with me today. I think it's a necessary one. Thank you for the lineup that we've had. Miss Anderson's work is gripping.
And one of the reasons why I thought it would be helpful to have Brandon on the show as well. He did a really good job of explaining how all of these things layered on top of each other and what you can do modality wise to layer these things on top of each other as well to bring the body into a state of healing. And he talks about it all in the way of frequencies and energy and quantum field of energy.
It's a complicated topic because we are venturing into new territory. It is in its infancy, and I wondered, there's too much to wonder. It's outside of my reach. However, because of my understanding of R.E.S.T, government, constitution, and the power and authority that we have as individuals to consent or not to all things, specifically laws of nature, things that are self-evident and speak to our natural affections. We have the capacity to consent or not. I realize that we're not victims of any system. We don't have anything to fear because the primary sphere of government is not outside of us, it's within us. Years ago, I read a book called Torture for Christ, and it was the martyr, Richard Rembrandt. He was captive in the prison in Romania. He mentioned that the Germans' forms of torture were kids' play compared to the Russians, and spoke to the beauty that he saw in the persecuted church. And it was while reading his work that I thought the enduring voice of a generation will always speak to the triumph of the human spirit. It's one of my favorite thoughts that came out of my mouth. And I often reflect on it and encourage myself with it. But it was through the stories that Pastor Rembrandt, who was taken into captivity after smuggling Bibles in the underground church, shared. And it was that if God got him out of that pit alive, and he was, I think, one of only a few people that ended up surviving that particular encampment, he said, should I survive? God, just give me life so that I will tell the world what is happening. He changed my view of suffering, of confusion and chaos and dis-ease because it had no power over him. It's a matter of fact, when he was released, again, one of the few people that survived, he said he pitied the Western church far more than the persecuted church because they were buried alive and they didn't know it. And at the core of my convictions is not to make bad people good or people that feel bad feel better. It's to invite people to rest so they can live free. It's to make dead people live. And I'm reminded of Pastor Rembrandt's words because he pitied the condition of the West, specifically the Western church, because We were living according to a false narrative, and we were enslaved in the worst way. We were being tortured in the worst way. We were being afflicted in the worst way. And like lambs to the slaughter, we were perishing in a concentration camp or under captivity, under brutal captivity. There's no question about the things that assault you and the things that are killing you. But somehow, he said, the inner man was being renewed daily, and the spirit knew its proper place. The soul understood its proper function. And the body, of course, was bearing the brunt of the whole experience. But I understood what he said to mean that in the West, worse things were afflicting us and we didn't understand it. And I think he wrote this book 40, 50 years ago. I need to find it. I need to dig it up. It's in my library. I'd like to talk about that. I'm trying to displace the confusion, chaos, and dis-ease that is causing the deception. And to do that, we need to understand the insults, the things that are insulting us and the things that are assaulting us and the things that are afflicting us. And when something as simple as our cell phones, Corey made that very clear, and we're all feeling it. But something as simple as a sound, as a frequency, as a buzzing sound, they can export so much control without our knowledge or understanding, causing us really to turn on ourselves and each other. And it's afflicting our entire constitution in one way or another, which is what Vicky brought to mind to us. I think you and I have the best job in the world because we have a hunger and a desire to displace the confusion, chaos, and dis-ease with the most powerful resources. And it is our capacity to reason. If we can tolerate accepting new ideas and stretching to the point of discomfort to learn these things. So I think that's the attempt.
One question comes to mind around this in an attempt to learn and also pass this along is when I've noticed in hearing you speak on several days of rest now and on the 40 days of rest. In my experience, and I'm sure you notice several different things as well, but when you begin to speak about government, a couple of things begin to happen to people. Some people, it's like, kind of like their eyes gloss over, and other people become more curious. Other people, it's like, I don't know what you're saying, but I know it's true. Right? There's several different responses,
and then there's anger because they associate government with politics.
Mm-hmm. So, how do we help people understand government without maybe some of these triggers that might cause them to check out and invite them to step into the deeper conversation of understanding their primary sphere of government?
Let's go to the very, very beginning. We see a newborn baby. The need of that child in short order, whether immediately or within a few minutes, is to cry. When that baby is put in contact, skin to skin, chest to chest, with the mom, it generally does what? Calm down. Instantly. It's a need for what? Connection, comfort. It's been living in her body. So now it is out and it needs what? Comfort, touch, connection, sustenance, provision. And in short order and intuitively, the inclination is to feed it, feed the baby. And immediately what happens? The central nervous system, everything calms down. And that is what we call a law. There is a law that is governing, that is obvious. It is self-evident. This body has been in my body. And now that it's out of my body, it needs what? Reassurance, comfort, connection, and what? Sustenance. So that is what we call a universal principle. It's common to all humanity. It is a law of nature that governs. So there's government in its most fundamental form. Direction, regulation, control, and restraint is all intuitive. The child can't utter a word. The mother can't really speak to the child in words, but she doesn't need words. He or she doesn't need words. They need things that are of existential constitution and practical constitution and psychological constitution. So you see the convergence of those three realms right there in that experience with a newborn child. I don't know if that was a clear enough explanation, but there are laws of nature, self-evident truth that appeal to our natural affections explained as that baby comes out of that birth canal. And there is the fullest, most comprehensive explanation of government. Internal direction, regulation, control, and restraint is intuitive. It is primitive. It is in the nature of that child to cry and to communicate with the mom and with the people in the room what it needs. There's communication right there. And intuitively, without a word, there's this existential thing, all these complex existential experiences that are transacting there. Everyone should take a few minutes after you listen to this podcast to document all those things. Break this down individually, privately with yourself. Write a paper, write a letter to your children, write a letter to your husband, write a letter to yourself of what that was like, either when you were born or your children were born or a sibling was born, or maybe you don't have siblings. Maybe you don't remember anything, but watch a live birth on television and watch the process. It delves deep into the realm of the spiritual, the psychological, and the physical. It is a beautiful illustration of laws of nature, the need of the child, the inclination and impulse of the mom. Self-evident, it's obvious that it is a cry for connection, for intimacy, for attachment, for sustenance, for need. It's communication that's taking place. And it appeals to all of our natural affection. Because is there any person there that isn't touched emotionally, spiritually, and psychologically by just observing this transaction? So I would encourage all of us, for some reason, to understand the beauty of everything that is raw about that primary experience we have in time, and then say, wow, what are the things that disrupt that? Those are the insults, right? Mm-hmm. They're physical, they're spiritual, and they're psychological. And so I know it's a long explanation about government, but I'm thinking, wow, what's something that we can all share right now, our listeners, you and I, and it's that birthing experience. And that same dynamic, that same interaction just repeats itself throughout our entire life. So maybe we can develop a grid around that experience as being a fundamental and the basis to understand what happens to us in time. To Corey's point, the insults with EMFs. To Vicky's points, trauma. She touched on emotional, spiritual, physical trauma. And she's the only person I've ever heard paralleled the reality of trauma with the insults that are coming to us through electronics, through media, through entertainment, and how it parallels the trauma response of watching your parents get shot or stabbed, or watching dad beat mom up, or watching and knowing that dad is sodomizing a sibling. The trauma response is all the same. And that is this dissociative state that kind of develops. It creates a fracture, a communication breakdown. And it's brilliantly designed so to preserve our life, right? It's just we can't stay in that dissociative state for the rest of our life or we'll implode. And again, I go back to you and Amanda and Hudson and the brutality of watching your son having 100 seizures and literally turn into a vegetable before your eyes. And you went to the best of the best that you could access. But it wasn't until you exhausted all conventional resources, even knowing me, even knowing our work, even knowing great functional doctors, that I really invited you to understand the convergence of the spiritual realm with the psychological power and authority to consent or not to govern. Don't silence that and access that resource within yourself so you can understand what's physically happening to your son. And you were able to do that. So you really stepped into government and understanding government, direction, regulation, control, and restraint of what? The spiritual world, the psychological, the soul, mind, heart, will, conscience, feelings, and your power to consent or not. And then the consequence it's had on your body. You and Amanda could have easily been divorced through this, and this could have been a disaster, and Hudson would be institutionalized for the rest of his life, or you'd have to figure out how to take care of him because he couldn't function. But it was your knowledge and understanding of rest, of government and voluntary consent. And there was rest available for you in the midst of despair that is so compelling. And I'm sorry for the long answer, but I'm stepping into uncharted territory as well. And so I don't always have words to communicate what's very clear in my head. So I want to thank everybody for tolerating that. What are the questions?
A follow-up question that I have then is, so for someone who's listening to this, right, and are in a similar position to where we were of there is, whether intentional or not, right, there's a measure of ignorance that they have about these insults. And sometimes, like when there are actual lies told by, whatever person who calls themselves an authority on some of these things, right?
And it might be ignorance, right? The lies often come in the form of ignorance.
Yeah. They may be unaware that, let's say someone, they had no clue that EMFs were damaging their bodies in any way and therefore damaging their soul or the psychology, the way that they're thinking. What do they do in that position? Like they don't know what they don't know.
Right now, I would encourage everybody, put a hard pause on medication because you're compounding the problem. We are putting enough information out there for people to question. Just don't run to be medicated. And I guess this is a deep conviction I have, because when there's a communication breakdown between our psychology, our body, and the spiritual constitution, anatomy of our being, which is universal, by the way, for all of us, I'd like to say, be kind to yourself and everybody around you, including the practitioners, including your children, your husband, yourself, everything. And just say, wait a minute, if rest has done nothing else, they've caused me to question, what do I know about the spiritual realm? What do I know about my soul, mind, heart, will, conscience, feelings, and the access points? I didn't even know that my conscience was my primary gauge. Your conscience should be your primary go-to because it will speak to you. The law of God is written in the heart of man. The conscience bears witness. It's universal. And again, I call your attention to a toddler, what they do, how they behave when they're doing something they know they shouldn't be doing. There's no lecture. There's no instruction. That's a law of nature right there in full display before you, that there is a law at work in the heart. Remember, where there's laws, there's government. There's something governing that child that intuitively they know, according to the counsel of their conscience, that what they're doing is wrong. That is a law that is at work within them. So we need to understand the soul and how it works. We need to understand, the body then responds. When I lie and I deceive and I do something bad, I feel sick to my stomach and I want to throw up. We run so quickly to say, this person is sick or my child is sick. What should I give them? Without asking the child any questions and engaging them in conversation to unwrap what is making them sick. The doctor doesn't know. You know more. In many cases, and I'm talking about generally speaking, you have access to them immediately. You need to know how to engage them in conversations, right? My husband is treating me awful, and I'm not going to tolerate that level of disrespect. We need to go to counseling. Wait a minute. Before you run to counseling, there is a law at work within your husband and within you, and you can tell something is off. But ask him questions first. I notice that you're upset. I notice you're not feeling well. Is there something I can do? No. Maybe the answer is no. Leave me alone. The point is that there's laws. We need, Jonathan, it's curiosity. Show up with curiosity. Show up with wonder. And I want to tell everybody, remember, there's 3 bodies. There's 3 kingdoms. There's 3 spheres of influence inside of you and everybody else that's at work all the time. And I want to invite you to be curious about where the communication breakdown is between those constituents, those parts. And then be curious, is the insult coming from the inside out or from the outside in? And take into account personality issues, disruptive behavior, a shutdown, a disengagement from that child, as something is afflicting my child, my marriage, my relationship, my company, by the way, my business, my employees. I wonder. And then if you're going to be curious, you're going to have to engage people in conversations and ask thoughtful questions. People always ask me, well, how do you know the questions? Just give me the template. Give me the formula. Tell me what to do. And I would give it to you if I had one, but I just ask God because I don't know. I ask them and then I ask God. That's my go-to answer for how to navigate these different realms and what's in conflict. And then, of course, we have a lot of resources to ask the body to speak to us. But it's really about establishing healthy methods of communication. First, among ourselves, among our own constituents, then between each other. It really comes to communication. And Jonathan, I don't know if I said this, but cancer is a breakdown in communication. That is it. In your cells. Study cancer and you'll understand the cancer that's afflicting your businesses, your ministries, your marriage, your relationships, and your children. Communication breakdown. That's it. Jonathan just happened to bring guests to us that are helping us mitigate the external insults that are afflicting us as well. The invisible giants, energetic parasites, if you will. And I'm struggling too with finding ways, and I'm sorry our listening audience has to tolerate my personal pilgrimage through this, but I am trying to find language, as you well know, to communicate really complex things, because at the end of the day, I like the analysis, I like the science, I like the theology, I like this philosophy. I have to connect all those dots to make sure that we're building on a solid foundation, and I've done that. But to communicate those things in simple 20, 30-minute segments in a podcast is very complicated. So thank you for your patience.
And that's one thing that is so wise that Dr. Cowden mentions in the 40 days of rest. Rest should be treated as not just coming in and getting your 20, 30-minute fix of it, but it should be as an IV drip, coming back and continuing to learn and reinforce these principles and set the foundation and build upon that foundation. So we invite you to keep coming back for more.
Right. And that's why our aim is to launch a movement. Because we know that once you understand the principles and the ideas, and you can help us be bold, take initiative, practice communicating the complexities of some of the things we discuss here and some of the resources, share the podcast, try to explain, bridge where your growing knowledge and understanding of these things is and where the general population, if you will, is. There's an incredible amount of ignorance, not having information that, in my opinion, has been systematically socialized, engineered, if you will, systematically engineered to make us compliant, pliable, controllable. And I propose that it is an assault to your very constitution to comply without questioning and reasoning. And so we want to slowly, as we're able, and respectfully as we're able, to understand that if you do not become intentional, if we do not become intentional in displacing the confusion, chaos, and dis-ease in our lives, regardless of where the entry point is, whether it's cancer, autoimmune diseases, relationships, bitterness, anger with the church, anger with government, anger with family, anger with spouses, anger with ourselves, whatever, that you can use these same tools to really displace the destruction that is afflicting your life from just the reality of the times we're living in. But if we do not intentionally displace the confusion, chaos, and disease of the age, and we do not become intentional of meeting those challenges individually at the point of which they're afflicting us, we're going to die in ignorance. And ignorance is not having information. And if we deceive ourselves and avoid and neglect rectifying our own ignorance or displacing our ignorance, we're going to be dumbfounded by the times. And if we're dumbfounded, we're going to end up in a stupor. And in a stupor, we become combative, we become defensive, we continue to fuel the seeds of ignorance and dumbfoundedness and stupidity. But what becomes dangerous is when we double down on being ignorant, dumb, and stupid. We neglect the state of dumbfoundedness and numbness that comes with it, and the stupor and the anxiety and depression that comes in a stupor. If we don't displace that, recognize it and displace it, we're going to become fools. And foolish people are dangerous because there's a spirit of pride and they become a law unto themselves. and they suppress laws of nature, self-evident truth that appeal to their natural affection. And then the quiet, still hours of the night, there's a lot of assaults. There's a lot of portals that are open when we neglect ignorance, dumbfoundedness, stupors in our lives. The state of being dumbfounded, the state of being in a stupor. We neglect that. We neglect it. We avoid it. We resent it. And we accuse other people of the shortcomings we know we have it ourselves. We become fools. And the reason that foolishness is dangerous, and we're seeing a lot of fools on social media, we're seeing a lot of things of foolish behavior in our midst, if you will. Instead of attacking the person, I want to invite our listening audience to recognize the disintegration of the human condition when you don't step into rest and you don't self-govern. You're going to be a very frustrated, combative, angry person. And it is an assault you're committing against yourself. Because again, in the quiet, still hours of the night, the conscience bears witness that you're really unstable in all your ways. And I would invite people who are listening that if this discourse was confusing to you, read James 1-4. And it talks about the source of confusion, chaos, and dis-ease. The root of it is really the conflicts that we have within ourselves. So we can't neglect that, because you compound that with the conflicts from these other resources that we've been discussing, and you have a slow death. And there's no pill or psychiatrist or psychologist that can remedy that. You nailed it today when you said to me, hey, just remember, yeah, we can have all these speakers on, but we got to teach them rest. It's not about giving speakers a platform. It's about helping them understand the expertise these speakers are bringing to the table. So, Jonathan, in summary, you've done an excellent job these last few weeks of bringing very difficult, challenging conversations to rest, and things that are almost hard to believe, starting with Hudson and you and the stories that we told, really in the context of emotional, spiritual, and physical consequence of confusion, chaos, and disease manifesting in all those realms. But now you brought these speakers, in summary, I guess, that are explaining this in the context of science in a realm that most of us aren't equipped or able or whatever we don't think about. It's jolted even us. But I'm thankful for it because the resources to thrive, be fruitful and multiply, subdue, and live with dominion is within the human capacity if they consent to living in accordance with laws of nature, self-evident truth that appeal to their natural affections, instead of becoming a law unto themselves. That baby analogy I used, of course, you can consent or not to reaching for that baby, putting him on your chest and intuitively feeling. But at the end of the day, that baby's trying to intuitively communicate with you. You either respond to that or not. And of course, the parent has the capacity to consent to that or not. But then the consequences are what? Natural. Whatever the parent chooses, to throw the baby in a trash can or to comfort that living thing, the consequences are natural. And I guess that's where we live. We teach people how to live rest. Nothing unnatural to man is happening to you. But if you understand these realms and these information systems, then you don't feel like a victim to circumstances in your life. You have the power and authority to rule and overrule. You've not been given a spirit of fear, but of power, love, and a sound mind. And everything in the human body and in the human brain in the most practical way is hardwired to love and to advance life, not diminish it. Thank you. Thanks for chatting with me today.
Thank you.
We hope listening to this episode has brought you closer to experiencing the freedom of wholeness and healing. If you have questions or comments about today's episode, or for updates about rest, please visit our Instagram or Facebook at The Place of Rest. If you would like more information about Virginia, or to support and join the cause of rest, please go to theplaceofrest.com/donate or call 949-289-5935. Thank you for listening to Rest with Virginia Dixon. We'll see you next week.